Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Levy. I work in the Office of Recapitalization at HUD, and I'm joined here with Anwa Simmons in the Transaction Division, Tamika Green in the Closing Division, and Rachel Kais, also in the Policy Division of the Office of Recapitalization. This webinar is for PHAs with 50 or fewer public housing units, and it covers a combination of two processes, the RAD Section 18 Small PHA Blend, which is a means of getting to higher Section 8 contract rents, and streamlined processing instructions we have for RAD conversions. So we'll talk about both of these and how they work together, how PHAs can take advantage of this opportunity, and we'll have plenty of time afterwards for questions. So in brief, PHAs with 50 or fewer public housing units can convert their public housing through RAD and both stabilize and often increase property revenue to place the property on a more secure long-term path, plus follow streamlined conversion requirements to reduce the processing burden and to convert quickly. Just for some context, in the overall public housing stock, there are 789 public housing authorities.
Yeah, try logging back in.
Thank you. There are 789 very small public housing authorities with 50 units or less, but this is 29% of all the public housing authorities across the country. These housing authorities, though, control a very small number of public housing units, about just under 25,000 units, or 3% of the public housing stock. Importantly, as we'll see later, very few of these agencies also have a housing choice voucher program. So this process for very small PHAs was created to help these agencies, often with fewer staff, lower ability to take on complex new projects, to convert quickly and see the benefits of a conversion. Through this conversion process, a public housing property can convert to a Section 8 contract. We actually offer two kinds of Section 8 contracts that have existed for decades. One is called the Section 8 Project-Based Rental Assistance Contract, where HUD administers the contract, and contract rents are capped at 120% of FMR. And then there's also a Section 8 Project-Based Voucher Contract, where a PHA with a voucher program administers the contract with the owner. Contract rents are capped at the lower of reasonable rents at 110% of the applicable FMR. And HUD requires the contract administrator to have a minimum number of vouchers to ensure sufficient capacity. So the key thing to know about a Section 8 HAP contract is there's a contract rent that HUD, the tenants pay 30% of their income, just like they do in the public housing program. And the subsidy pays the difference between the contract rent and the tenant rent. So if tenant rents go up, the HAP subsidy goes down, and if tenant rents go down, the HAP subsidy goes up. But the owner is guaranteed a certain amount of revenue, providing for much greater predictability and stability for the property. Through a RAD Section 18 blend, importantly, PHAs with 50 or fewer public housing units can convert with rents set at or above the fair market rents. But basically across the country, every very small PHA would achieve contract rents that are at or above the fair market rents for their area. How does HUD do this? Well, sometimes the RAD rents on their own, just based on public housing funding levels, are strong. And then sometimes when they're not strong enough, HUD can approve a portion of the property, of the property's units through Section 18, and then uses the resulting tenant protection voucher assistance to fund higher contract rents. In a streamlined RAD conversion for PHAs with 50 units or less, we eliminate much of the due diligence that's normally required in RAD conversions. In order to be eligible, the PHA must have, as we talked about, 50 or fewer public housing units in their program, and to show to us that through RAD or other means, it's going to remove all of its public housing units under its public housing ACC and close out its public housing program. The PHA has to have an overall FOS score of 75 or higher and a pass score of 30, not have a FOS substandard designation or FOS capital fund trouble designation. And very importantly, the PHA can't propose to us to do any work as part of the conversion. Not just the work's not required, but to make the conversion as simple as possible. We don't the conversion cannot entail work to be eligible for a small PA for the streamlined conversion process.
Yeah, I muted your microphone. Right there, trying to do
For
something.
importantly, for project-based voucher conversions, HUD requires the contract administrator to have a minimum number of vouchers to ensure sufficient capacity. We don't have that same requirement for project-based rental assistance conversions, though. Just important thing for any housing authority to look up first is what would your contract rents be? We have a RAD Rents workbook available on www.hud.gov/rad, where you can quickly look up for your PHA what contract rents you could achieve as part of a conversion and compare it more or less to what you're getting today. And after you apply and we issue you what we call a CHAP, a commitment to enter into a HAP contract, PHAs can generate a more precise blended rent calculation. Now, a few other key features of the conversion process. PHAs can contribute all their capital funds or operating reserves to the converted property. So this is important because you don't have to spend it down before you leave the public housing program. You can bring it with you and establish a new reserve at the property or fund other things you will need to fund at the property. All subsidized units would be under a RAD project-based rental assistance HAP contract or a RAD project-based voucher contract. Public housing residents, even though they're now entering into the Section 8 program, are not rescreened as part of the conversion. They're automatically admitted. Then after conversion, the contract rents that we discussed earlier are adjusted annually by an operating cost factor. And after conversion, any property cash flow is unrestricted. There's no operating reserve or residual receipts account or anything where the cash flow, the amount that's left over after you pay your expenses, is restricted. It is unrestricted funds that belong to the agency. We'll walk through some key differences between project-based rental assistance and project-based vouchers. Project-based rental assistance is a contract directly with HUD. It's funded from HUD's single project-based rental assistance account, which is one of HUD's most stably funded accounts. HUD has never not made a payment that an owner was due under a TAP contract from this account. Rents are capped at 120% of FMR or higher in some cases. Properties under these contracts are subject to the Inspire inspections, just like they are in public housing. The tenant certifications are now under a slightly different tenant certification, the 50059, and there's a choice mobility requirement where families can request a tenant-based voucher after living in the property for 2 years. But PHAs without a voucher program can request an exemption to this requirement. As I said, that over 70% of PHAs, of very small PHAs, don't have a voucher program. For project-based vouchers, which is the other option, it requires another housing authority with a voucher program to administer the contract. So again, for almost all very small PHAs don't have a voucher program and would need to team up with another agency with jurisdiction. And that other agency would earn administrative fees under the Section 8 program in order to do the tenant certifications and physical inspections and things like that. The project-based voucher contracts are funded from the PHA's Housing Choice Voucher Program. HUD provides new funding into that PHA's program, and that PHA uses those resources along with all of its other resources to fund its voucher obligations, including a new project-based voucher contract. Rents, there's a lower rent cap. Rents are capped at 110% of the FMR or the reasonable rent. These properties are subject to the Inspire V inspections. Tenant certifications continue under 50058, but they're under the voucher module. And there is also a choice mobility requirement where a family can request a tenant-based voucher after 1 year, and there's no exemptions. I'm going to turn to Anwa to talk through a case study in Faribault, Minnesota.
All right, so Faribault, Minnesota utilized the small PHA blend process to convert 49 units that was scattered amongst 22 residential buildings. A portion of the units was approved, so through removal from RAD, and another portion through Section 18. There was no rehab needs, which was confirmed by the PHA. They certified the needs of the property instead of submitting a ECNA tool. And Rice County Housing and Redevelopment Authority administered the vouchers for this conversion. The biggest takeaway from this slide is the rent potential. So if Ferry Vault had continued to process using 100% RAD, their rent potential would have been about $8.5 million, and taking advantage of the under 50 small PHA blend, they was able to double their rent potential. So their 20-year rent potential went from about $8.5 million to almost $17 million, or 16.9. And so this slide really shows the growth of rent potential if taking advantage of the small PHA blend. So the streamlined process for the 50 and under small PHA blend is similar to our traditional RAD small PHA blend process with some simplifications. You follow the normal procedure of submitting a RAD application and then receiving a CHAP. For this one, PHAs are assigned technical assistance, so HUD will assign that directly to the Housing Authority. Again, no ECNA tool is required, just a certification of the needs. And then for the environmental review, there is a more streamlined process through our site-specific streamlined environmental review process. PHAs are required to amend their PHA plan. So with all RAD transactions, you will have to include in your PHA plan your plans for the RAD conversion, and then, of course, consulting with the residents. So that standard consultation with residents, resident engagement process that we have for RAD conversions. And so this slide kind of gives more detail about that process. So you're requesting your concept call when you're ready. That request is through the RAD resource desk. You're submitting your RAD financing plan through the RAD resource desk as well. This includes the certain supplemental documents for your RAD Section 18 blend. All of that is uploaded to the RAD resource desk, so there's no need for any separate applications with SAC to complete this process. Your pro forma should show the entire project, so cover the expenses over the 20 years. Again, no scope of work. You are able to use public housing funds to cover any closing cost. And then the more simplified environmental review, and that is through the site-specific form. The Office of Recap will coordinate internally, and so, again, no need for a separate Section 18 application. Recap will then approve your financing plan, will issue the RCC, and then SAC will, or the Special Application Center, will issue their Section 18 approval for the portion of units.
Turn over to Tamika to cover closing.
Thanks, Will. So in closing, it's really just business as usual for us. Not much changes on the closing side. Typically, the Housing Authority will prepare and submit their draft closing package for review. You're assigned a closing coordinator. You'll work with your closing coordinator to make sure that all program items are met. And also, legal counsel will be assigned to ensure all legal items have been met. No need to worry about requesting funding for your TPVs, whether it's for a PBRA transaction or PBV transactions. There is no need to contact the field office anymore. Recap will coordinate internally and to make the funding request for you. And we built in a new tool on the closing page, at the bottom of the closing page, where you can do your own calculations to see what the total funding amount will be. So once all program items and legal items have been met, we'll take you to closing, where we'll then execute the RAD HAP contract. We move towards just a single HAP contract. Once we get into closing, we'll then release the DOT and have the recording of the use agreement, and then we'll have the units removed from PIC. And if there's construction that's taking place, then, or if there's no construction, completion cert is also required. You're just certifying that No additional funds or loan has been taken out against the property. All the residents are returned to the property or remain in place, and that all reserves have been deposited. And what we've noticed in closing for blend transactions that the ownership and control structure goes various ways. Before closing, of course, the property is owned by the housing authority. And after closing, we'll see it where it's owned by the housing authority, the instrumentality of the housing authority, an affiliate of the housing authority, or if it's a tax credit transaction, there's also an LLC that's created. But no need to worry. In any event, the closing division will take care of the transfer of ownership at closing.
Thanks, Tamika. And just to wrap up, we'll have a new tool coming out for very small PHAs that helps to walk through each step of the conversion process and helps to pre-fill out certain forms and submission requirements to make the process as easy as possible. So look out for that. And with that, let's move on to questions. Let's start with Juan.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Juan Garcia with Riverside County. I had a question. Once properties are converted and they're no longer public housing sites, and we want to explore options to do a LIHTC project, when do we involve the HUD closing team? How early on, and is there maybe some sort of a like material that we can read up on regarding how other housing authorities have used the process?
Sure. So let me just first say that after conversion, it's very common for public housing authority for the property to undertake new rehab sometime down the line, whether that's they didn't do any work at the time of conversion, like often will be the case or will be the case in these streamlined conversions, and then a few years down the line, maybe they take out new financing. Or they do work at the time of conversion, and 10 years down the line, they do some more work or take out some new financing. The request starts on the RAD resource desk often as a post-closing request, I believe. We are actually in the middle of writing a notice with more instruction on new financing after conversion, but you can always reach out to us at rad@hud.gov, and we can set up some time to talk through how it would work.
I'll just to add to that, we're still writing out the process, but if we've already accepted the completion certs, then it's no longer an officer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie, you there? Stephanie, I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. You might want to try logging out, logging back in, and we'll call on you when you come back. Okay. Thanks, Stephanie. Give us another try when your audio is working, or if you try logging back and come back in. Chris?
I will, everyone. I was wondering if there's been any talk about increasing the number of units that qualify for the Streamlined conversion beyond 50 at any point in the future.
Yeah, there's always talks to figure out. We're always trying to figure out what we can do to make the programs most effective and provide housing authorities the best tools to preserve and improve their stocks. So yes, there's nothing specific though is that I can share or any kind of realistic timetable. But Certainly, if you've got ideas that you think would make our programs better, we encourage you to send those in to us. We'll love to hear from what we can do better.
All right, thanks, Will.
Thanks. Anyone else? Chuck, are you trying to ask a question? Or
Can you hear me?
yes.
So this streamline, to go back what the last question was, is for the total number of units in the public housing, or just the number of units in the project that you might want to do the conversion on?
It's a total number of units in that housing authority has.
Okay, is 50 or less?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many units do you have, Chuck?
220.
So you'll get there eventually. So as a PHA with 220 units, you're still eligible for the RAD Section 18 blend, right? So you can still increase your revenue across any project you convert. The difference, though, is while you have more than 50 units, will still require a capital needs assessment and things like that. But then once you convert a few properties and you get below 50 units, that last property you could use to analyze this process.
Then the requirement would be you go into that streamlined conversion then?
Right.
Yeah.
So what we see a lot of housing authorities do is they sequence their conversions to maximize the revenue that they can earn and figure out which one would they save for last for the streamlined process.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. You again?
Hi, just have a question. So, if the authority also has like some fair clause, like authorities left and they want to maybe have the opportunity to utilize it in the future, is this like streamlined RAD conversion or prohibit them from doing that down the line? Like there's like nothing concrete planned out yet.
It does not prohibit that at this time from using what we call restore rebuild. A PHA, though, does need to commit to closing out its stock, and that could mean closing out its stock closing out its public housing program after it's built any fair cloth units that it's able to.
Okay, thank you.
Bob?
Good afternoon. Hi. There was a slide earlier regarding the replacement reserve funds. I guess I'm looking for some more clarification regarding those reserve funds. After conversion, I've been told that the remaining replacement reserve funds go to the municipality who oversees the housing authority, not the new owner entity. And so, but I think I saw on your slide that that initial body could give or donate those funds back to the new owner entity. Is that correct? Because my understanding is that if it goes back to the municipality, they can use those funds for new affordable housing development. However, that municipality will continue to have a public housing program, but new facilities. Also, those funds could be used to close out the public housing program with HUD, and I'm curious as to what the cost is of that. And alternatively, another option was that those funds be returned, at least the remaining balance, back to HUD. Can you provide some clarification on that slide?
Sure. So in a RAD conversion, this doesn't apply to Section 18 if you just take a property out through Section 18, for example. In a RAD conversion, the housing authority can contribute public housing funds into the conversion itself. So all of the funds could be used to and applied to the property. And very often what we see is, I could speak more to this, the PHA is establishing a new capital replacement reserve or an operating reserve at the property. And so that way a PHA doesn't have to spend those funds down. The other options, if a PHA does not move those funds to the property, they're still restricted for public housing purposes. So they have more limited uses. They could be used to pay for closeout costs, but that's usually not a lot of money. That's paying an auditor and getting a final clean audit on the program and other soft costs like that. Nothing major, or could be used to build more public housing. Those are eligible uses of public housing funds. But if the PHA otherwise doesn't have any eligible uses, those funds go back to Treasury. They don't stay local, and certainly not forever. So the most common thing we see is the housing authority moves all of those public housing funds with the conversion to the property.
Thank you.
Jay.
Yeah, hi. We in July of this year will be down below the 250, and we have contemplated the Faircloth to RAD. I was hoping you could expand a little bit on what you said for the other question about the timing, because if we're down below 250 and then submit a Section 18 application for the remainder, do we have to have a Faircloth to RAD project in place before we submit that final disposition application, or could we do a Faircloth to RAD project after final disposition?
You can do it afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, you would just be as you get to 0 units in your public housing program, you would fill out a form that identifies your future plans, and you would say, I still intend to build public housing units under my Faircloth.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
And Jay, when you said you're under 250 units and you would submit a Section 18 disposition application, do you mean a RAD Section 18 blend application?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah, sorry. Right, it would be the blend. Right.
Okay. So we would require, as each property converts, you'd be giving us a very simple repositioning plan. So it's a one-page table that just says, here's how I'm going to convert my remaining public housing stock, and you don't need to account for future Faircloth development. You're not required to close out until if you still also intend to build Faircloth units.
Thanks.
We have some questions in the chat. We love when people raise their hands. It's more fun that way. But if we'll move to the chat until others raise their hands. I will go in. Okay, the first question is, well, essentially, what if I have 80 units? Do I qualify as a very small PHA as well? No, you're right now, it's just 50 units or less qualifies as a very small PHA. Now, if you have 80 units, you still qualify for the blend, for the RAD Section 18 blend, and you're looking likely getting you a pretty large increase to your revenue for the property. But you wouldn't yet qualify for the streamlined processing unless you first converted a property of at least 30 units, and then had a separate second property that went through a streamlined conversion process. Keep looking at some of the chat questions, but looking for any other raised hands too. There's a question: are we required to have an audit of financials before closing? No. The financial audit is only required when you actually to close out your public housing program. But as part of any individual RAD conversion, there's no required audit of the agency's financials outside of the normal annual auditing process that you go through with your FAST submissions. We have a question about the rent setting slide. I'm going to bounce over there a moment. We didn't dwell on this, but just to show people how we get to the blended rent. In this case, what happened was there were some units that converted with the RAD that converted with RAD rents. There were some units that converted with normal project-based voucher rents that were funded through the new tenant protection vouchers. The 3 and 4 bedroom units were used because those were higher revenue, were used in the blended rent calculation. So we ultimately got to were these numbers on the right hand side, and the 2 bedroom rent was much lower because they had all of those units. They applied the RAD rent to all of those units because that was to the greatest advantage of the property. You don't really need to worry about this in the calculations that we do after you apply. We make sure that the resulting rent calculation is done in such a way that you're not missing out on some feature, on some opportunity. Okay, any more hands raised? Any more verbal questions? I see another question. Is this what we talked about today? Is this just about public housing units? What if an agency has 48 public housing units and they have 300 voucher units? Are they still eligible for this? Yes, we're only looking at the number of public housing units that the agency has. Another question. We're doing a Section 18 blend, but there are 2 buildings that need to be demolished in order to have enough space to build a new building. Do we do the demo dispo application first, or is it all done with the blend? The answer is it's all done with the blend. There's no need when you're doing a RAD Section 18 blend to separately submit or try to sequence an application for Section 18 to the Special Application Center. At the point of conversion, point of the financing plan, as Anawa discussed earlier, we use a lot of the things you're submitting to us for the RAD process, and we request a couple of additional 5 additional items that are needed to fill out the Section 18 application, and then we do that coordination within HUD without you needing to submit anything separately or be cognizant of the timing. I have a question about instrumentalities. So as Tamika discussed earlier, we handle any transfers of the property in the closing process. Sometimes, and including for RAD Section 18 blends, sometimes we see that the housing authority retains the ownership of the property. Sometimes we see the housing authority dispose of it to a nonprofit affiliate, or if they're using tax credit financing, to a tax credit partnership or LLC. But yeah, all of the standard RAD ownership models apply as well to the RAD Section 18 blends. Okay, any more questions folks want to ask? Again, we prefer the out loud questions because then we can come back to you with any clarifying questions ourselves. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, so just to clarify, housing authorities that have fewer than 50 units or fewer, that does qualify for a Section 18 disposition, but the streamlined conversion is another option for housing authorities with 50 or fewer public housing units?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Chris, for pointing that out. That if you're for PHAs with 50 or fewer units, Section 18 alone allows you to qualify just for Section 18 and to replace the housing with vouchers. Just because you have 50 or fewer units. The main advantages of using a RAD Section 18 blend and the streamlined RAD conversion process versus going through Section 18 are primarily the housing authority can bring the public housing funds with them in the conversion. They don't have to unnaturally spend the funds down or set them aside in hopes of building new Faircloth units sometime in the future. Residents are not rescreened as part of the conversion, so you can guarantee that you're not going to accidentally displace any families because they may not qualify for Section 8 for the Section 8 program afterwards. Those are some of the big advantages. Rents wise, you get about the same contract rents because through the blends, the rents are across the board are at or above the fair market rents. So more or less the same as what a property would get under the normal project-based voucher program after Section 18. Go ahead, Jay.
And to that question about you get about the same rents in the 90-10 split, I believe it's 90% Section 18, 10% RAD. There are ways that you can augment the 10% rents, the 10% of the remaining units. Is that correct? Is it with the demo dispo transition funds or the ARF funds or other sources?
Yeah, so we don't have to get into all the weeds here, but the primary way the rents get augmented there is the demolition disposition transition funds that would have been triggered by the Section 18 units. We automatically incorporate that into the RAD rents, and that often pluses the amounts, the blended amount higher. Then we've got other provisions in RAD like an opportunity zone rent boost and a host of other flexibilities that could also be used when setting the rents.
Thanks.
We have, go ahead, Chris.
Another question for you. I'm just trying to better understand the differences between a small PHA, so 250 units or less, 90-10 blend versus the streamlined, very small PHA blend. It sounds like with the streamlined, housing authorities are not allowed to do any construction as part of RAD conversion. There's a lot fewer steps. It seems like it goes through a lot quicker. Can you explain more about why it's streamlined if you're 50 units or less versus 250 units or less?
And like from a policy perspective, why we've got the streamlined process?
Yeah, just better understand the reasoning behind it and the key differences between the two.
Sure. So the primary reason we've got the streamlined process is we've concluded the risk to the department is much lower. A central premise to RAD conversions since the beginning has been we want to make sure that any property that we put under a Section 8 contract is going to be viable and sustainable for the long term. And so that's the capital needs assessment is critical to that, right? Understanding the conditions of the property. But we also recognize that for very small PHAs, it's very limited capacity to procure to pay for the costs of a CNA and do some of that extra due diligence and transactional work with HUD. So the process was streamlined to help these PHAs get the benefits of conversion without as much of the administrative work and without creating a significant risk for HUD.
And so I can just jump in here just to explain just a little bit more about some of the differences. As Will highlighted, the key differences is the environmental review. So having to do a full environmental review for the traditional RAD small PHA blend instead of just doing the site-specific form that only touches 4 or 5 of the environmental factors, a full ECNA tool, so having to do both components, the narrative, as well as the 20-year reserve schedule. And then in this case, there is no work to be completed, and so that document isn't necessary. The entire process is similar. Requesting the concept call, using the RAD resource desk, coordinating with your transaction manager, uploading your documents for your financing plan. That is a similar process, the small PHA blend. The repositioning plan is a similar process. In both, it's really just a few of those more due diligent items that we've streamlined just to make the conversion easier.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Okay, Zoe.
Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to sort of piggyback off of Jill's question in chat about the Section 18 side of things in terms of if you're utilizing the very small streamlined conversion and you're not doing any demolition, but if the PHA were to retain the property or not really dispose of it to any other entity, how is there really a Section 18 aspect involved in that scenario? Does HUD just allow it as part of the blend, or I think that's sort of the question there.
I see. Yeah. The through the blends, we follow the RAD closing process, which the disposition is out of the public housing program. The property is disposed out of the public housing program, and it's commonly permitted for the PHA to continue to own the property outright. More often, we see the PHA at least create a single asset entity, just an instrumentality, just to protect itself from liabilities at the property. But we've also seen RAD Section 18 blends convert where the housing authority is able to retain ownership.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
And I just want to add that kind of changes if you're doing PBRA or PBV. With PBV, the housing authority cannot be on both sides of the HAP contract. And so keep in mind that that there will need to be some transfer just for purposes of facilitating the HAP contract.
It's another reason why for very small PHAs, a PBRA conversion might be easier. Okay. Any other questions? Well, otherwise, we'll wrap up in just a couple minutes. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, folks can raise their hands for, we'll wrap up. We encourage you to send any questions to rad@hud.gov as things come up. If you have more questions, as you're trying to figure out what your next step ought to be. But we hope your next step is to submit a RAD application and the RAD resource desk. Because we're hoping this process can be as easy as possible for you, and we see a lot of upside, as Honorable pointed out in the case study. So thank you very much for participating today. Everyone have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.